There's been many WrestleMania builds that could have been much better than they were. Some of them were even horrible to the point where the match itself gets overlooked. Okay, the WWF had a lot riding on WrestleMania 17. It was going to be the biggest WrestleMania in history and a show that stood the test of time. It was an easy main event that year, Austin and Rock again. Rock had matured so much as a talent in those 2 years that it justified a rematch. The build for this match was a very easy one to execute, but WWF wanted to be too smart about it, and so they included Austin's wife, Deborah. This was very unnecessary and brought some unneeded issues to a match that built itself easily. Deborah was positioned as the manager of The Rock by Mr. McMahon, and this was a way to bring some sort of intensity to the match. But it was bad because Deborah felt like an NPC to The Rock, and the fact that her inclusion feels so dumb. You know, it's like it's Austin and Rock. You don't need her. WWF fixed this problem though, and the promo makes the build seem like some grand one. Luckily, the match was tremendous and a highlight of both men's careers, so obviously it wouldn't be talked about badly. But the build wasn't very good. There was moments in between where Rock hit Austin with the Rock bottom, they traded finishers, but it wasn't a good build. Triple H suffered a huge setback in May of 2001 during a time where he was considered one of the very best in-ring performers in the world. He tore his quad. This left him sidelined for the entire Invasion storyline, and upon his return, Triple H was cheered like he was some sort of loved hero. The fans missed him so much that they turned him face. Triple H was a clear choice to main event WrestleMania at that time, but unfortunately though, his opponent Chris Jericho didn't feel like he was on his level. Y2J was the undisputed champion, and while he had good matches and character work, his credibility was the weakest for a world champion in a WrestleMania build. Jericho had Stephanie as his manager, and this was the death knell to his push because he was the world champion and was the third wheel in a WrestleMania main event feud. This guy was cleaning dogs' asses while holding the two most valuable titles in the world of professional wrestling. Nothing about this build makes you doubt Triple H could lose, and when Jericho did get the main event, they were overshadowed by Hogan and Rock. I still think it was a solid match, just not what the fans were looking for. But yeah, the build itself wasn't very good. It was centered around Triple H and Stephanie, with Stephanie using Jericho as a way to go against the game. And there wasn't many moments where Jericho himself looked strong or looked like there was a chance he would win here. So it was a very underwhelming build. While John Cena had succeeded at being the guy WWE was looking for, there was still one last thing to do to fully establish him as the #1 guy in the entire WWE. Beat the game. The only problem was Cena had a lot of crowd negativity at the time, and this reflected on him badly. So WWE had the bright idea to present him as a weak professional wrestler. This was dumb because it only made Cena look worse than what he was already considered by the crowd. What made it so bad was that despite this, he was glazing Triple H as the final boss of professional wrestling throughout the build. It was unnecessary because the story with Triple H underestimating Cena was already good enough, but they added this element of realism with Cena being this mediocre wrestler inside it. The story was, to put it simply, this. Cena made it far, but that was it because he needed great wrestling skills to overcome the game. I don't know why they made the story like that, but they did. The match was pretty good though, with the champ making the game submit. It's just a matter of simplicity. Similar to Rock and Austin, this match didn't need much to have a good build. Instead, it made their face of the company look worse than what he was already. You call him a bad professional wrestler, his wrestling's ugly, it's bad. It wasn't a good thing to mention. 2010 WWE is a very strange time. The strangest thing about it though is Michael Cole becoming a major character of the shows. This was a very dumb decision to make. While Cole was capable of playing a great heel and douche, it came at the detriment of the show. Michael Cole was the voice of Monday Night Raw, and there was many points throughout the show where he didn't shut it down and play things normally. WWE had the great idea of having him face Jerry the King Lawler at WrestleMania. This feud was long term and built over 4 months, and this is funny to me because a story between two commentators was getting all this attention and effort from WWE, but this was bad. They gave them plenty of time in their segments, and at one point Brian Christopher returned to one of the coldest crowd reactions in history. I think for a returning wrestler, this has to be #1 because nobody in that PG era recognized him nor cared to know about him. The worst part about this was that WWE knew nobody cared much about this story, so they brought in Stone Cold to increase interest in the match. The build was horrible and the match even more so. It was a gift to be in a singles match at WrestleMania back in 2011. It was one of the hardest things to do in WWE, and these two were handed this for no real reason. Lawler had his story about wanting a match at WrestleMania, but other than that, this was nonsense. Vince probably thought it was the best thing ever with the amount of time these two had over that 3-month period, and the match itself was terrible and a disgrace to professional wrestling. It was supposed to be a squash match with the King closing down and shutting up Michael Cole. If you watch the story, that's how it should go logically. Instead, Cole goes unbeaten at WrestleMania and blinds the audience from proper entertainment. It was horrible. The World Heavyweight Championship by 2011 was clearly the number 2 title in the WWE, and the margin between the belt and the WWE one was widening with each month. WrestleMania 29 comes around, and at this point it meant less to be the World Heavyweight Champion. The Rock was WWE Champion and Alberto Del Rio was the World Heavyweight Champion. That tells you all you need to know. Now on paper, when you see Jack Swagger and Del Rio in a world title match, it sounds ridiculous, but back in 2013, WWE was very high in these two. Not as high as Swagger was in this image, but they really liked them. Swagger had been repackaged to a very different character compared to what he was previously. Swagger went from a jock to a man that wanted to get rid of illegal immigrants. This approach brought some optimism to the name Jack Swagger. Now, if you look at the WrestleMania card in November of 2012, you'd guess that it would involve The Big Show, Randy Orton, Sheamus, or Dolph Ziggler. Like some combination of these 4 men, right? So this was a crazy and radical change in favor of something that brought risks. Swagger was presented a bit controversially. The whole We the People thing came with baggage because Glenn Beck, a conservative commentator, criticized WWE for this story. This got to the point where WWE had Swagger and Zeb Coulter break character in a segment. I really like this character of Swagger's because it stuck out like a sore thumb in this clean-cut PG era. It was a good time to do something like this and try risks. Unfortunately, Swagger was busted for weed though. He was still pushed strong in the build because it came with media attention, and on the other side, Del Rio was forced to play a role he wasn't used to. A rich man appreciative of the United States. It was very weird, and if WWE had their way, Alex Jones of the InfoWars would have made an appearance at WrestleMania 29. This whole story was wild, but it was also unimportant by the time the show happened. Swagger didn't even have an entrance at the show. That tells you all you need to know. A match for the World Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania having a skipped entrance is insane to me. So while the whole build wasn't terrible, nobody really asked for it because at the end of the day, it was Jack Swagger and Del Rio for a World Heavyweight Championship match. Now, if it was a non-title, it'd probably go a bit better, but for the World Heavyweight Championship, yeah, it didn't look so good. There was a lot to be happy about when WrestleMania 31 went down, but if you go back 2 months earlier to the Royal Rumble, there was plenty of pessimism for the show of shows. Roman Reigns' push was super strong and rushed to the point where everyone saw that this man wasn't ready. Brock Lesnar didn't appear much, and Reigns had a push that was far too big for him, and WWE refused to budge, even if it hurt him greatly. The build for the match was met with so much negativity as nobody believed the match would deliver. I don't even think this was a thought for some, and what solidified this was the tug of war at the end of the Raw before WrestleMania. So much aggression from these two, and it was all suppressed in this segment. A segment that gave WWE the opportunity to build hype for this match and try to ensure that it was going to be an intense encounter. This was one of the worst builds for a main event match at WrestleMania. It was boring, lazy, and forced. But then it turned out to be one of my favorite WrestleMania main events. A full-on fight that tested Roman Reigns' resiliency in the face of the final boss, the Beast, Brock Lesnar. Honestly, this might be a hot take, but I'd rather have a bad build and a super great match because when it's the opposite, you feel deflated. A match you imagined would complete the build and make it all tremendous gets ruined like that. This was the opposite. And this match was spectacular with a cash-in capping it to make it a top 5 WrestleMania main event for me. I remember watching WrestleMania 31 and being stunned at how good it was because the build was horrible and the card wasn't exactly going to make you want to tune in. But there was a great atmosphere which to me plays a small part. 2020 was definitely the strangest year in the last 10 years. Wrestling as a whole was tested like never before, and while the year was depressing, there was some positives to come from it. Some took the time away from the fans to hone their craft. For Sasha Banks, the Thunderdome era is a career year for her. It was filled with plenty of memorable matches and moments. She was the best women's wrestler in the WWE arguably, and it felt like she was only getting better and better. Surely she deserved a strong place in the WrestleMania card. On the other side emerged Bianca Belair, one of the brightest prospects to come out of NXT. Now I personally didn't really think that Belair would get such a strong push so early, because she was shuffled around in the early days of the pandemic era. Then from out of nowhere, she won the Rumble. This set up a huge match between the EST and the Boss at WrestleMania. Unfortunately, the path to get there was pretty tough. The build involved a lot of nonsense. This team was all over the place in the build to WrestleMania 37, and I think they didn't care about making this a must-see match since it sold itself. But my issue with this is that even though Belair won the Rumble, it didn't feel like she was ascending to some super high level. Even though she was, she was actually facing the SmackDown Women's Champion, one of the biggest and most successful women's wrestlers in WWE history, but it didn't feel that important. Because having a title match at WrestleMania is huge, yet the build didn't establish that. There was Reginald involved in the parts of the build, Sasha and Bianca became partners and worried about each other at some point, and that of course was to ensure the match goes down, but there was no fresh approach to the match at all, and for the top matches, it had the worst build for that year's WrestleMania. That's all forgotten though now because the match was incredible. They got to main event night 1, which was a bit surprising seeing as the build was the most uninspiring, but they made the most out of the opportunity. It was the best women's match at WrestleMania up to that point. I have Bianca and Becky higher than this, but it was amazing. There was a great vibe and energy with night 1, and they capped it off with a classic, one that stands out amongst the best matches in both women's careers. WWE from 2018 to 21 was filled with some very weird stories and characters. Shane McMahon was one of them. He randomly became one of the top heels in the company, and this guy had so much TV time that rumors started coming up that he was going to end Kofi Kingston's title reign. And that was actually believable. I actually thought that would happen. He disappeared for a bit before returning in March of 2021, and his return felt like a debut because this man forgot how to play a character on TV. He was set to feud with Braun Strowman. This story already was stupid, just like Braun Strowman, according to Shane. The issue with it was that Strowman was being bullied despite being a very successful wrestler. He almost beat Brock Lesnar, dethroned Goldberg, and has victories over Roman Reigns, but Shane is the one guy he struggled with. The segments were messy, there was slime at one point, it was embarrassing stuff. And on top of that, Shane's segments were so bad that they were hilarious. He was randomly sweating in the middle of the ring, calling Braun stupid and pacing around with no purpose. It felt like this segment glitched. There are some questions about Shane's health at this point due to this segment. I'm not gonna lie, it was a bit funny during this segment, I just gotta mention it. And then the following week, it was the same thing. It was awkwardly cutting a promo as if he never cut a promo before. Only a couple of months earlier, he cut a promo for Raw Underground. This whole thing was terrible. There were some elements of it that were entertaining, but it wasn't because it was good. I just found it strange how Shane forgot how to play a character. Luckily, Braun wasn't too stupid in the end and threw Shane out of the cage. He instead threw him off the cage, but back in the ring to win the match. But the highlight of this feud will always be that segment where Shane forgot his lines. It led to an entirely awkward situation and kind of ruined the build before it even started. WrestleMania 37 already happened under odd circumstances. It was an event where the return of crowds sold itself, and naturally, as WWE usually does, certain things feel unimportant. Now, heading into WrestleMania, the big story when it came to the Raw Women's Championship was centered around Charlotte Flair. We're gonna be saying that in 2030, don't worry, but the biggest problem was that she was supposed to feud with Lacey Evans. She was with Ric Flair at the time, which is strange in itself, and to make things even crazier, she was supposed to beat Asuka for that title to make her match with Charlotte at WrestleMania for the Raw Women's Championship. That almost explains why Asuka and Rhea's story was so boring. Rhea had just debuted on the main roster, and without a struggle or story, she was already in a title match at WrestleMania, and yeah, Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler were somewhat involved with the story. It's common at this point. It led to a weak match at WrestleMania. The fans weren't really interested much in this, and a part of that is because there was no story. It was clearly done last minute. When Rhea won the belt, it didn't feel fulfilling or deserving much because there was no journey. They had a 2-week build for this match, and none of it was exciting. Hell, I just might retract my previous statements. This might be the worst build to an important match at WrestleMania 37. Alright, those are WrestleMania builds no one asked for. Luckily, a lot of these matches did turn out to be good, but some of them could have been built better. It is what it is though, so yeah. Alright, what do you guys think of these WrestleMania builds? Please comment down below, and that's it for this video. Make sure you hit the Stone Cold Stunner on the like button, or perhaps the spear on the subscribe button. Peace, I'm out.